Shabomahin,
Here.
Trustee Alexander,
Here.
Trustee Polito,
Present.
Trustee Bloom,
Here.
and myself, I am present. Quorum is present. We will continue on to item number 2, the approval of the agenda. I will entertain a motion.
Through the chair, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Roll call, please.
President Latu,
Aye.
Vice President Shabomahin,
Aye.
Trustee Alexander,
Aye.
Trustee Polito,
Aye.
Trustee Bloom.
Aye.
And the motion carries 5-0. Wonderful. So now we will go on to item number 3, which is our board study session for 3A, which is exploring options for district-wide reopening.
Great. I just wanted to make sure that all of our team members who should be promoted are promoted. Solomon. I think we're just waiting for.
For whom?
Lada to be promoted. Oh, there she is. Okay. She got promoted. I think our principals, Robin, I think our principals can be attendees, Solomon, until we need them.
Okay.
Thanks, Robin, for being available. Okay. All right, I will begin to share my screen and get us situated here. Thank you for taking this evening to be able to explore the possibilities of reopening schools across our district. Trustee Latu, I see you. Do you see the presentation cover page? Awesome. Great. I'm almost situated. We just finished our school improvement working group, as well as we reviewed some other proposals literally maybe 10 minutes ago. So Trustee Bloom and Trustee Alexander were with us since 4 o'clock. So this is going to be an endurance test. Yes, cheers. All right, well, we have our staff here, our cabinet, and also our consultant who is our pandemic response effort consultant, along with us here to do a joint presentation for this evening. And again, it's about reopening schools across our district. So the conversation tonight is really about what is best for our students and what do our kids need. And so we looked at the conditions recently, and obviously they have improved dramatically. We shared that information recently at the last board meeting. And we believe that we could definitely bring back more students back to campus safely. We also did a survey, and we've learned that we have a high percentage of students or families who would like to bring their students back on campus. We also are informed about how our students are doing in terms of engagement and attendance. And it's quite sobering when we look at what the data says about their distance learning, around their engagement for distance learning. And we do know that they will do much better if they were in person. And then for most of our students, in-person instruction is often more effective than virtual. Again, we want to be mindful that we are looking at reopening schools across the district because it's what our kids need. So the agenda this evening, we have several points. We would like to do an overview about the distance learning and how it's going in general. We'll be sharing some information around engagement, attendance, and some assessment data. We will give you an update around the current COVID status. And actually, we just received some new information from the county superintendent during our superintendent meeting. Again, great news. And then we'll give you an update on the family survey results we have several reopening scenarios to share with you for the trustees to consider. And then we also wanted to give a brief update around the stimulus funding that we've all been hearing about. How is that money going to be spent? And we would love the opportunity for the board to have some discussions, ask questions, and of course, give us direction on how to proceed around reopening. Okay, so we will proceed. So across the country, distance learning has made student engagement much more challenging, as we know. According to an independent analysis, only 25% of LA Unified School District elementary students were actively engaged in distance learning this past fall. And engagement was even more lower for Black, Latinx, low income, and English learner students. In Oakland and West Contra Costa school districts have also seen higher absenteeism rates versus pre-COVID. We will now take a look at our data specifically, and our Student Services Director, Cindy Chen, will share.
Yeah, you can see here in the graph, the 2019 data is pulled because that's our the last CASP data, the last state data that we have on our dashboard regarding our chronic absenteeism. So we had, at that time, 18.5% of our students were considered chronically absent. And chronically absent is when you are absent 10% of the school year. So when we looked at our data for attendance in January, we saw that our absenteeism, our chronic absenteeism rate was 38%. And really a lot of that had to deal with between Thanksgiving to, after Christmas time, a lot of our kids had to be absent due to just some of the things that they were dealing with at home and, COVID situations as the rest of the country kind of saw a spike during that same time period. We did some attempts to try and help address our chronic absenteeism. And at the end of the second trimester, you can see that our chronic absenteeism rates have dropped a little bit down to 33%. Obviously, it's still higher than when we were physically in person compared to 2019. So when we have the opportunity to have our kids on campus, we are definitely we have more kids attending.
Thank you, Cindy. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to ask Solomon if you wouldn't mind sharing the deck with the trustees. I'd appreciate it.
Will do.
Thanks. So the slide here is, believe it or not, indicating that we have been doing this for over a year now, right? And with some sentiments here that I'll share that Lada also, I think, also expresses, is that, Friday the 13th, we had to flip everything from in-person instruction to remote learning. And what we've had to do to get through, this past year has been just unbelievable. And, all of us here on Women's Month, we've had to do a lot of work. And so hats off to all the teachers, hats off to all the directors, hats off to all CSEA unit members in terms of what we were able to accomplish. And much of coffee and whatever energy boost that we've needed, I heard many staff members say, well, we're like in the fourth wind right now in terms of having to just continue to stay motivated, to stay inspired, be creative in the midst of trying to figure out how to support our students and our families. As you all know, most of our students didn't have device or internet. So fortunately, with the foundation and the support from other partners, we were able to pull through and provide devices, Wi-Fi hotspots, and make it possible. We were able to, over the summer, take a slight reprieve, but we were actually hoping that we would be able to come in person as a hybrid model, right? And so our staff were planning a hybrid model and was about to propose a hybrid in-person model for all of our students. However, the conditions during that time did not support that. And we we switched again from a hybrid model to doing complete distance learning. This winter, we've taken time to review attendance data together, get our bearings with instructional improvements through the new leaders partnership. And we're still able to focus on instruction as well, really trying to ensure that we improve our engagement. We realize engagement, as Denise mentioned, is very challenging. If we can get our strategies around improving engagement during distance learning, it'll be amazing what can happen for in-person. We, amidst trying to figure out how to do instruction, we have to cope with the loss of over 500,000 people in America and who've lost lives to their lives to COVID. And we've had many family members who've been impacted by COVID. I want to make sure we emphasize that we are, and staff here who are trying to encourage reopening, is not oblivious to the impact COVID has had on our communities. We are well informed, and that's why we decided to go with remote learning in the fall. That's why in the winter time, we were still very concerned. That's why we were really encouraged to be placed on the top of the priority list for vaccines and wanting to get testing on a regular basis for our students with the rapid testing, why we wanted to encourage our families to do weekly testing so that this community can be informed and be safe. But now we are in a different place, and we'll show the COVID status update to indicate we are in a much better place than we were in the winter. However, we need to continually recognize that there's still some challenges, and we need to stay focused as much as we can on our students during this time. And we'll be able to share with you right now just some changes that have had to happen because of the status changes of COVID. And so a lot is going to dive into the impact that COVID has had on our teaching and learning, and especially around assessment.
Thank you, Gina. So this next slide shows a few data points that demonstrate how we've been monitoring student progress, but administering assessments has also been challenging. So for example, monitoring students' literacy progress in K-5, we've been using a new program this year called Lexia. And some of the advantages are that it's a blended learning program, so available online. It is computer adaptive, so it assesses where students are and it gives them activities to work on at their level. And Lexia, like many blended learning programs, has a set amount of usage that they say really maximizes student benefit, which is about twice a week for up to 40 minutes. And you can see a snapshot of the percentage of students at Belhaven and Castaño who were using it at least that often in early March when this data was taken. And the numbers that you see here, 16% at Belhaven and 9% at Castaño, those are lower than the number of students who have logged on and who have taken the diagnostic assessment and have tried out the program. But ideally, we would be looking at more consistent usage. And then another snapshot of data is our 6th through 8th grade middle of year literacy assessment, which is Let's Go Learn. So again, a good tool to have because we've used it in the past. It can help monitor progress. It's available online. And you can see the percentage of students that we were able to assess for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And those percentages, we saw them go up actually from the beginning of year to the middle of year administration. But you can see, 8th grade is definitely the closest to 100%, but we're not able to get quite everyone assessed. And so a few of the challenges for administering online assessments could be students not reporting online, like to the scheduled Zoom session for that assessment. Sometimes if students aren't able to complete it in one sitting, then it relies on them, logging in another time to complete. And there's also cases where teachers have limited instructional time and they really want to be using it for instruction as well, whether it's whole group or small group instruction. One example for that is in our middle school, students have their core classes twice a week. So if I'm an English language arts teacher and I'm seeing my students twice a week for 2 periods in the week, then, I'm thinking, how can I really do justice to my unit and my lesson plans and balance that with assessment? So there's quite a few challenges around monitoring student progress that we've encountered.
And the picture here illustrates our students taking the LPAC test. I think these are 7th grade.
So we made some adjustments to our MOI assessment calendar, which stands for middle of year, and our beginning of year assessment calendar as well. So for middle of year, we have 2 of our K-5 sites using Lexia, like I mentioned. One site was conducting the one-on-one reading level assessment for the middle of year. And then in math, we are not collecting a district-wide assessment for middle of year. And then in 6-8, the English language arts assessment is Let's Go Learn. And in math, the focus was for 8th grade students on their high school transition assessment, because that's important data that we pass on to students' high school. So you can see here some progress that students are making. So students are making progress. So for example, with Belhaven and Castano, this is a snapshot of a report from Lexia that shows when the students first started using the program and completed the diagnostic. This was in the fall, around November and some into December, compared to the current status, the second bar on the bottom. How many or what percentage of students were working in below grade level material in gray, in grade level material in light blue, or above grade level material in dark blue. So you can see that the progress for both of those. And then similarly at the bottom for 6th through 8th grade literacy, you can see how Let's Go Learn measures students like reading level, grade level equivalent based on like the grade level number and a decimal point. So for example, 5.5 grade level means about halfway through 5th grade. So you can see the growth indicated for each of those grade levels as well. So we can see here that students are making progress, but like we mentioned, monitoring that progress and always knowing exactly how students are doing can be challenging over distance learning. And we have to ask ourselves, like, is this the progress that our students need and deserve?
So we feel like the best solution is to get kids back on campus for in-person instruction with teachers. And we want to continue to improve the engagement piece, improve learning in the distance format as well, because we still have families that elect to want to do distance learning. So however we teach our kids, we need to improve the delivery in both formats. But we do believe that the best solution is getting kids back on campus for in-person instruction. I had our student service director, Cindy, pull data as well, just to show the difference between all students in the grade and students who are currently in a hub from that grade. And Cindy, do you mind just speaking to this graph, please? I appreciate you pulling that up for us.
Yeah, so this is just a snapshot of one grade level. We compared the first trimester attendance percentage versus the second trimester percentage. So you can see that compared in that first set of bar graphs there for all students in that grade level. Now, when the second set, you can see when the students who are in the Learning Hub wasn't able to open for that grade level until second trimester. And so you can see the attendance rate for the kids who were able to be on campus, their attendance rate was much higher compared to when you compare it to all the kids in the grade level.
And this is only a snapshot of one grade at one school. But it does speak to, even if it's not the classroom teacher and it's the student in campus supervised by other adults, on campus, doing distance learning even, there's improved attendance in this case. Thanks, Cindy. All right, so are there any questions around the distance learning update? And through the chair, I wasn't sure if we want questions at the end after each section. I'm happy to follow your lead.
I think if there's any urgent questions, we can ask during the section. If not, we can hold it and maybe stop after the updated family survey results, like halfway point, and then continue, if that's all right with everyone.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we'll give you an update on how the conditions are in our area as it relates to COVID. And we will have Ann Waterman-Roy, our pandemic response effort consultant, share some information with you.
Great. Well, Gina gave a bit of a teaser on this before, but the news continues to be good in terms of COVID rates in our community and in the county as a whole. So as you all know, the county is currently in the orange tier. And we learned just an hour or two ago from Gina and from the superintendents that if it continues in this path, we could actually be on path to be in the yellow in not too long, which is just astounding personally to me when I think about how we've gone over the past year and the ups and downs. That's very exciting. So this is showing there are two metrics that we always look at. One is the positivity rate. So the chart on the left shows the positivity rates over time, where you can see it spiked up as high as almost 15% in East Palo Alto. The green line is the proxy for East Palo Alto in our community, and it has dropped precipitously over the last 2 months to the point where we are now both at the county and in EPA are below 2% and continuing to shrink the difference between those two numbers, which is great news. And then the other chart we look at is the number of new cases. What's the rate of new cases? And that obviously had previously spiked across the county, but especially in EPA. You can see we've cut the bar off, so you can't even see how high it spiked earlier in January. And it has also come way down. So at this point, it is just in San Mateo County, it's in the orange level. And at an EPA, it is still in purple, but it is coming very close to the new bar for red tier, which would be 10 new cases per 100,000 on average for daily new cases. And this has continued. You can see from the chart on the left, you can see it's been going down, kind of staying flat, creeping down, going down a little farther. So this continues to go in the right direction and is a good sign for both the work that our community has done to try to control the spread, and also the commitments that this community has made towards supporting COVID testing and supporting vaccinations, especially, which is the way that the combination of masking and starting to have more vaccinations is going to help us keep these rates lower going forward. I'll kick it back to Gina then to talk a little bit about vaccination rates.
Great. So yes, we were fortunate to be on the top of the priority list in the county as the superintendents across all the districts in the county prioritized the districts with the higher number of students who are unduplicated. So those who have lowest economic status, foster, or ELs. And so we were very grateful, and many of our staff have capitalized on being offered the vaccine. So we helped over 218 folks get vaccinated, 188 are Ravenswood employees. So whether or not they got vaccinated or were invited to get vaccinated, everyone had the opportunity to get the vaccine. Here, 63% of staff reported getting at least their first shot. If we break it down further, of our RTA staff, 67% reported getting their vaccine. Again, this is their response to a survey, so the rate might actually be higher. And then from our CSEA staff, based on the survey, to indicate whether or not they actually did get their vaccine or are scheduled to get their vaccine, 48 out of the 135 who responded to the survey said they got the vaccine. We do believe that the rates are much higher, and we're still waiting to hear back from our staff in the survey. And yes, most of us are in the process of getting our second shot this week, as most of us got it February, late February, the last week in February. So the reopening status in San Mateo County as it stands right now of the 16 San Mateo County districts, elementary school districts, I should say, 15 are scheduled, if they haven't reopened already across their district, are scheduled to reopen. Jefferson Elementary, I believe, just got a tentative agreement with their bargaining unit and their board approved April 12th. So in addition to that, I just also want to just clarify, as for example, the South San Francisco Unified School District doesn't have their reopening plan date yet for the middle school or high school, but they do for their elementary school. So Ravenswood is the district that's still waiting for a district-wide reopening date. We now have to report to the state also every 2 weeks, and we need to indicate why we are not reopened district-wide and what are the barriers to reopening. We have to be explicit with that. And this is under this is a new requirement under Assembly Bill 86. And for us at this time, based on the data that Anne just shared with us, the conditions are right to consider district-wide reopening.
And update on reopening. Since the last board meeting, we have submitted to our county, the COVID safety plan and an updated reopening and recovery plan that indicated our intention to reopen Castaño and Los Robles officially with the proposals we discussed in the last board meeting. And the San Mateo County Offices of Education and Public Health have both reviewed. They've approved the COVID safety checklist, the updated recovery and reopening plan, and have vetted those. They had very minor comments just for clarification really on our safety procedures, and said that those were all in alignment with guidance and with best practices. And so as a result, Castaño and Los Robles are officially reopened according to the county and state guidelines, and are considered to be a pilot program. So if you look at the county's website where they list when folks are reopened, when districts are reopening, our district is listed as a pilot program because we've got some of our parts of our schools, and of those schools, parts of the grades that are reopened fully. And so Castaño is proceeding with their plan to phase in additional classrooms starting in April 12th as planned, and more after that. And if the link here, all the COVID safety plans are posted on the web. And in fact, if you go to our website, you can, one of the highlighted boxes on the top right is COVID safety plan. It takes you directly to the safety plan so that anyone who wants to see them can understand what we're doing to keep our staff and students safe. On the next slide, we wanted to give an update about the state's distancing requirements. So this was big news, well, at least big among the education world. By the CDC announced last Friday, and then the state announced on Saturday that they are relaxing distance requirements, physical distancing requirements between students to 3 feet. And this was based on some of the latest science. So one thing to note, this is if people are wearing masks, students can be 3 feet apart safely. This is what the CDC had guided. Also, the World Health Organization has actually been recommending this distance for months, but it had taken the CDC wanted to look at additional data to verify before they made an adjustment to their initial recommendations. Among other studies, one of the major research studies they were looking at was a study in Massachusetts where schools were given the option of having 3 foot distancing or 6 foot distancing. So they looked at 500,000 students in these schools in Massachusetts and saw no significant difference between schools that had 3 feet of distance and 6 feet of distance, which told them that based on the science, that was not that extra 3 feet of distance was not a significant influence on reducing spread of COVID. One thing they did note is that in Massachusetts, masks are mandatory. So some other data you see from other states, it may have looked mixed. Often that's because in some of those other states, masks are not necessarily mandatory. And so this was a better proxy for what it's like in California. Another note is that staff continue to stay 6 feet apart. For adults, there's a higher risk. And so we make sure that staff stay 6 feet apart from each other or from students. And students are expected to stay 6 feet apart if they're having their masks off, for example, while they're eating. And the important this is a pretty big change, and it's rooted in the latest science on this. The most important implication for us as a district and for schools across the country is that we can safely fit more students into a classroom, into the point where we can actually fit a regular class size into a classroom safely. We have to move, the desks may need to be moved around differently than they've been in a normal year, so that we can attend to every student being 3 feet apart. But it actually is possible, given the size of our classrooms, to fit pretty full classrooms within our rooms safely, with continuing with masking, et cetera.
Through the chair, can I ask a question about the study? Is that
Mhm.
okay? Forgive me if I didn't hear you correctly, Ms. Roy, but in the studies that they saw, did they distinguish if the students surveyed and results of, if anything, like if they were getting tested, if any of them were COVID positive? Like before, was there mandatory testing? Right, 'cause I'm wondering, like, if you're in a classroom and there's no COVID, then it won't show anything, whether it's 3
Mhm.
feet or 6 feet. But if you're in a classroom and someone does have COVID, it might make a difference, right? The 3 feet or 6 feet, I imagine. So yeah, do they know anything about the testing?
So I would want to go, I can go back and look at the underlying tests that the CDC was looking at, or the results of the studies that the CDC was looking at. But the takeaway that I was told is that across these 500,000 students in multiple schools, they looked at where, most classrooms in most schools don't have no COVID even comes up, but they looked at when it happens, was there spread, I believe, is what they were looking at. And what they saw is there was no difference in spread when you have between 3 feet distance or 6 feet distance. So I guess to your point, if you've got a higher rate in one community than in another, you might be more likely to see it coming into the school, but they were not seeing any difference in spread, which is really the thing that a school can actually control. And I can look for a little bit more detail and links to some of those studies as well and share those on also.
Got it. Thank you. And is our county using that as a guideline now for schools reopening?
That's a good question. Right now, CDHP just
Mhm.
made that change, and we believe we will get an update on the county guidance next week.
Thank you so much. Sorry to interrupt. Thank you, President Latu.
Okay, thank you, Anne. All right, so now we'll go into the section that will share some information about this family surveys that went out. And here with the help of Parent Square and Student Services Director and the administrative assistants at the school sites, beyond just sending the surveys out, we made also several phone calls. We were able to get 680 students to answer the survey, or families to answer for 680 students about their interest in returning to campus. We sent it out March 4th. And since then, as I mentioned, a team of staff members made some phone calls to families as well to reach out to as many as possible. And so the response rates from each site ranged from 27% to 59%, depending on the school. So the data here shows the interests of wanting to come back or not. At the bottom of each bar, you see the school's name, you see the number of responses and the percentage compared to the school's enrollment. Okay, so 32% response rate compared to the number of students enrolled at the middle school, 51% response rate at Belhaven, 27% at Castaño, 59% at Los Robles, Ronald McNair. Okay, and you might say, oh, well, why Castaño? Well, we already have families also very much connected with the teachers in terms of planning for return. As you recall, you approved several classes to reopen, phase-in model April 12th and the following weeks. And you can see majority of our families do prefer to come back to campus, with about 40% of our families at 3 of our sites and 32% at Castaño wanting to remain distance learning. So if we wanted to say and hold these numbers to be true and want to project for the entire enrollment of the district, this would be about 1,093 students who we would need to prepare for to return to campus. That would equate to about 348 students at the middle school, 291 at Belhaven, approximately 326 at Castaño, and 128 at Los Robles, Ronald McNair, if we project these numbers. Okay, because we did not get feedback from all of our families in the survey. But every time we do get information, it doesn't necessarily change the percentage. It's always been hovering around 61%, 39%. And then here, this just shows the difference between our English-speaking families and our Spanish-speaking families. And there is more interest from our Spanish-speaking families to attend school in person 5 days per week. And then when we look at also our English-speaking families compared to our Spanish-speaking families as it relates to whether or not they would mind switching teachers, majority of our Spanish-speaking families wouldn't mind switching teachers if it means coming back on campus. Any questions around the parent results?
Through the chair. Yeah, I don't have a question, but if we're looking at all 3 of the sections that we've gone through, I want to just say that we, as a district, have been listening to science, and we've been trying to open, and we've been creative in how we've been bringing people back. And I also want to say, we're one of 16 that's not open right now. And I think this is the point that I was trying to make during the last board meeting, is that, school districts all around us have opened, and it just continues to, we're putting at our, how much more of a gap are we creating? Or are we putting our kids at a disadvantage or creating more of a disparity between us and the ones around us? And that's kind of what I wanted to say, because if we look at those numbers, that shows around 50% of our district wants to come back in person. And right now we don't have a spot for 50%. I mean, I don't know how many kids are being met through the learning hubs from the numbers, but I know that all the kids who want to come back have not been able to come back in person yet. And then going back to some of the other data that you guys were talking about, when we're talking about the positivity rate, right? We're almost in yellow tier. And so when we think about the study and we're thinking about our rates our rates are going down in our community. We've offered vaccines for all of our teachers. And so we would look more like that Massachusetts study if we continue to follow all the safety protocols, which I assume has been approved by in our safety plan. So I just want to make that point, and I just want to point that out.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we are going to dive into the reopening scenarios for the board's trustees to consider.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And if you don't mind, no, you're multitasking.
Sorry, I have 2 dogs and 2 children, just decided to run in at exactly that moment. So, so looking ahead at the possibilities of reopening, we just wanted to start off by making it very clear that safety is non-negotiable in plans for reopening and larger scale reopenings. We have some strengths to build on. So as I mentioned before, the county has approved our safety plan, so we can feel confident that our COVID safety checklist is up to date with the best current information. And as it changes, the county's been good about pointing out to us, and we are also trying to keep up to date on any state or county guidance that changes so we can update our own procedures. And those are pretty detailed. There are a lot. These are some of the very specific categories that where we have detailed our procedures in the COVID safety plan. One of the things that I wanted to call out was that as they've done more research and as they've been looking at these different practices, the state has been clear that all of these practices are important layers to stack on top of each other to increase the chance of safety for our staff and our students. Right? No one thing is perfect. And even all of them together can't be 100% guaranteed, but they describe it as being like layers of Swiss cheese. There may be holes of different sizes in each of these layers, but when you stack them on top of each other, you got a stack of 8 pieces of Swiss cheese. You can't see through it anymore. Of this, they've named that the first 3 in this bucket, the stable groups, the face masks, and the physical distancing, those are the ones that the CDPH has called out as being the 3 that seem to have the highest impact on preventing spread. The others are all important, but the first 3 are the ones they're really emphasizing. So for example, cleaning was something that we took really seriously in the fall, and disinfecting everything. Now science tells us it's very unlikely to spread through surface contact. It's much more through aerosols. And so that's where masking and other procedures are more effective than having lots of disinfecting all the time. In fact, they say now disinfecting can be harmful to student health, so they recommend not doing it unless it's really you do it when you have a positive case, but otherwise you're using it much more judiciously. So that's something we just wanted to establish. And then the next slide shares a little bit more about, well, what does that mean on a school level? So we have a district-wide plan, and each school is now updating plans to really ensure safety on their campus with more students, and looking at that safety plan as the basis for what's that going to look like on my campus in particular. So the last board meeting, you heard from the principal at Castaño talk about some of those procedures and protocols that she was planning to put in place to maintain stable groups, to ensure safety and entrance and egress, then knowing where the kids are moving throughout the campus. She has taken this to a whole nother level of detail to spell out very clearly, for example, entrance and egress plans and signage. You can see those little blue names that shows where is each grade level actually going to be entering the building so that we can spread them out. They don't all come through one place. And what does it look like at the end? And what is the signage to match that? There's maps. This map shows where different before school screening and waiting areas are, lunch and recess, and how students will rotate around them. School entry, breakfast, recess, lunch, dismissal procedures really spelled out in detail, even to the point of bathroom assignments. So for example, Robin has thought about, all right, we've got 3 sets of bathrooms. This is which grades are going to go into each. Here's how many kids can be in a bathroom at a certain time and safely avoiding crowding or spread. The bathrooms now have capacity limits posted on their doors. And these are all expectations that are being communicated to staff and students. And then coverage schedules to make sure that whenever a teacher is out of their room, who's covering those students and how. So we wanted to just make sure the board feels reassured that those elements in the COVID safety plan are not just being left at a district level. Each school is very specifically thinking about how does that play out on their particular campus, and implementing and communicating to families and staff to make sure we can really live up to those expectations. So we wanted to give some comfort there.
Yes.
Yep. And then this next slide is around COVID testing. So this is one of the other layers that we can put in to ensure that as folks are not, that we can catch cases before they spread. So as we think about more students coming on campus, we know we need more staff to be able to do testing to make sure we can test these increased numbers of students. Good news, the state pilot program is extending through the end of the school year, at least. So that's great news. And our CSEA staff have really stepped up to take on support for some of this testing. And last Friday, you'll see some of the fabulous members of our CNE team, where we had 8 CNE staff volunteer to come and be trained to do antigen testing, and they were fantastic. And so we are now working to develop schedules to scale up testing to cover all students as they come back, and make sure that we can provide that layer of safety as well.
Yeah. So we are always balancing priorities when considering reopening plans. And so obviously we want to remain student-centered as we balance our priorities, and how we can bring, of course, more students back on campus for in-person instruction. When we look at on campus, first it's how many students can we actually bring on campus, considering the classroom size, considering reopen status. And then in terms of in-person instruction, how much in-person instruction will they get? And so what will the schedule look like as we develop the schedule? We are also working with in-person and the students who are doing the distance learning. And those trustees who are on the school improvement working group have gotten a feel of the creativity to be able to pull off some high flex models that we'll get into a little bit, and we talk about the terms, to be able to do simultaneous instruction in person and online. So how many students can we get on campus, and how much in-person instruction time can we create? Of course, we want to consider maintaining relationships. We want to hold on to the homeroom teacher and have kids be with their current homeroom teacher as much as possible. We want to ensure that the quality of the instruction is maintained. Can the teacher, implement the model effectively, whatever that model might be, whether it's a hybrid, AM, PM, high flex model. We want to make sure that whatever changes are done, that the students who remain and who choose to receive distance learning still receive the same quality of distance learning. We, are looking at teacher willingness too. And we are right now currently working with all the teachers who are volunteering to come. But there is going to be a time, and we want to receive direction from the board, is of the classes remaining, how do we require teachers to respond to the call of action based on the needs of our students that we need to serve? The space as well, do we need to consider the Learning Hub space compared to the in-person instruction space? And I'm very grateful for the partnerships that we've had with the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula, the 49ers Academy, East Palo Alto Tennis and Tutoring, in terms of working with us and being as flexible as possible as we expand the idea of reopening. And any type of, cost that's accrued because of the staffing that we need to provide to ensure the supervision and the release of staff and what have you. And there are going to be some costs, because right now we're also doing infrastructure with IT. So as much as we want to stay student-centered, that means some things get pushed aside, or we might increase, which affects our overall budget. So we wanted to give you an update currently of the status of staff who are on campus and working in person. We have CSEA who's already on campus, and they've been working on campus with students and families all year. And we've had administrative staff who've already been in person. Myself, directors, principals have been working in person all year. And then you have some RTA staff who voluntarily have been working in person. And currently, as we have it, is that our team members may work or teach on campus and in person if they volunteer to do so, to come in person. And our RTA MOU as it is now allows for the district to require staff to return in person when we reopen for all students. And again, we are working with those teachers who are volunteering to come back, but the survey does reflect that there is more need for more certificated staff to support the interests of families who want their students to return. We're also being very mindful of the fact that we will honor reasonable accommodations. And so we have and will continue to make reasonable accommodations for staff with any medical reasons that make them not able to report to work in person. So now we'll dive into some scenarios, but I have our special ed director, Jennifer Grabham, who's going to kind of give us some background information as we talk about these different terms.
So as with all things in this last year, we educators like to invent brand new vocabulary to define things. A year ago, I was saying asynchronous what? I don't understand. And now it flips off the tongue so easily. So before we go into the scenarios, I wanted to define some terms that we're about to be using in these scenarios. So hybrid flex, also known as high flex, is teaching students in person and on Zoom at the same time. This is currently in use by some teachers at Castaño and in some other places, but that's hybrid flex and high flex, doing those two things at once. Half day in person is teachers teaching remote learners at one half of the day and then teaching in-person learners at the other half of the day. And that could be either in the morning in person or in the afternoon in person, and vice versa with the students who are on Zoom. Learning Hub Plus is students doing their learning on Zoom, but there's a credentialed teacher in the room to provide them support. So you could have a substitute in the room while the kids are in Zoom with their classroom teacher, or you could have their classroom teacher in the room, but them taking a lesson from another credentialed teacher, like at the middle school. So that's Learning Hubs Plus. And then in-person and distance only homerooms, in-person and distance only homerooms is the idea that if we reshuffled all of the homerooms of students to have the in-person teachers only have in-person students on their homeroom caseload, and the distance only teachers having distance only students on their caseload. So these are some terms we wanted to familiarize everybody with before we dive in. Back to you, Gina.
Thank you. As I go into this next slide, there's a couple of changes that we did not have a chance to make since our update in the School Improvement Working Group. But before we proceed, I believe that Trustee Browan, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, about under the health and safety that we were just talking about. What has been done to, as far as ventilation systems in our schools? Because I know the buildings are much older. We do have air purifiers in all the rooms, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the air purifiers and windows open. And if I could ask you to share a little bit about do you want information around the ventilation guidelines, Trustee Alexander?
I just wanted to know, to make sure to know that Ravenswood ventilation, because I know our buildings are very old. I don't know when last they were updated, if they're meeting the guidelines that are necessary. I'm just looking at every little angle here.
Yeah.
Superintendent Zudadia.
I could share a little bit about that, and then Will or Delma might be able to provide more, because when checked in with them, they my understanding is that they've that we met with an architect and engineer in the fall and to examine the current ventilation systems, and looked at ways to adjust them to increase airflow, increase the fresh airflow, which is encouraged, and to get rid of as much of the, send as much of the current air outside and bring in fresh air. And that also the district has, I believe, received a grant to improve the ventilation systems in all the buildings. However, that is a longer term rollout, so that's probably not going to be finished until next year, but the plans are underway. Unfortunately, because it's a larger construction project, as you said, because of the buildings are being older, that can't be turned entirely on a dime. And then if Will's on, if there are other pieces that that I've missed or misstated, I'm sure he could chime in and correct.
Yeah, through the chair, just to clarify one thing, I think that was mostly right. I think we are interested, the state of California has indicated that they will make some funds available through AB 841 to allow sort of the overhaul of older ventilation systems. The current stimulus funds, as we'll talk about later, do allow for direct investment in HVAC systems. It's not a quick fix, and the state funds, the deadline to apply is actually in April. So we hope to apply, but we're not necessarily guaranteed to get it. And the terms of that funding application are also still being discussed, and it's looking like the initial hype of the program may not actually match some of the funding available at this time. So we may need to explore some other options. It's something that we were thinking about very clearly. I also find very helpful a graphic from the New York Times fairly recently, just talking about sort of the value of a window and an air purifier and sort of what that can do and how that actually is perhaps not as effective as sort of hospital level filtration systems, which are what the HEPA filters are. But I think that the guidelines are thinking that's probably a little bit overkill, and a purifier or two, depending on the size of the room, plus some ways to get ventilation through an open window and open door could be sufficient here. I'm happy to go more in depth here. I know this is sort of a real important topic.
Thank you very much. And I apologize, President Latu, through the chair. Better late than never.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will get this down.
Fabulous. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Anne. And Jen, thanks for going over the definitions here as we now dive into the scenarios. All right. So yes, so we have updated information here. So scenario one, though, is just continue with our approach of bringing students back on campus, class by class, and it not being categorized as a district-wide reopening. And this is what we've been doing. We've been presenting to Cabinet and to School Improvement Working Group proposals that principals have been developing with their teachers who are volunteering to come on campus. And so with that, then scenario one would be that we continue with our plan to reopen Castaño that has already been approved by the county, right? And then we want to open additional classes that we shared this evening with the School Improvement Working Group, where Los Robos Raul McNair would bring not only their kindergarten teacher who's currently on campus pushing an instruction that's also considered a reopened status for the kindergarten for the school there, because all kindergartens had the opportunity to receive in-person instruction, but we would offer first grade, second, third, and fifth grade students as well. Belhaven, instead of 2 classes, actually we presented 5 classes this evening. And Ravenswood Middle School, Cesar Chavez Ravenswood Middle School, we're not presenting the whole school. It's looking at 2 teachers who would support with like a learning hub setting and support with the distance learning, but they're certificated teachers who would do that. And then also we have 24 students with special needs who would be on campus receiving in-person instruction from 2 special ed teachers. So what we would then do also under scenario one is continue leveraging the Learning Hub partnerships that we have. And those students then would have a chance to continue with distance learning on campus in a safe environment with adults that ensure that they are doing the work that they need to be doing. So this is scenario one. It's what we are currently doing. And it is based on staff who are willing to come back.
So, through the chair, I don't know if this is a good place for questions or if we want to do all scenarios or what, but should I ask?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Okay, thanks. If we continued with this scenario or went with this, what would be our reason, and what is our reason now that we're submitting to the state for not fully reopening? Now that they're requiring us to let them know why we're not fully reopening, if we did this, what would be that reason?
I think the reason why we wouldn't consider reopening district-wide right now is because we don't have all of our teachers volunteering to report for in-person instruction.
Sorry for that alarm on my phone. So you said, I don't know if I missed something before that last part of the sentence. So the reason is because we don't have all of our teachers reporting.
Who are volunteering to report for in-person instruction.
Okay.
And why are we continuing with this model is work with those who feel comfortable and confident to come onto campus, right? And we have also the opportunity to explore different models as well in terms of instruction, but it doesn't necessarily mean every site is doing something similar. And so we are always questioning the equity piece as well in terms of the amount of instructional time that some students get in person versus other sites. The good part about this, though, is that we are exploring different models that could potentially work that we would maybe want to consider exploring and implement in the fall. Also, how would in-person instruction and flip instruction look like during the summer? So right now we are doing scenario 1 because we are working with what we have to work with.
And I'm assuming there's no requirement from the state or county that outside of the case where we go into full reopening mode, there is no requirement for us to bypass the teachers union and get substitutes or whatever if such, a certain percentage of families or the community want instruction. There's no other requirements we need to think about. Basically, it's in our hands as a district to figure out what we do.
It is, but we will have to bargain at some point different pieces of
Sure.
the plan around safety, right, facilities.
For sure.
Yeah.
Just trying to see if there are any other requirements that we need to consider outside of.
Well, what we do, if we are going to reopen district-wide for families who want to come back, we need to prepare to provide that service. And that does mean then we require our teachers to respond to the call of action. Because we wouldn't have enough teachers to do so now who have volunteered. But scenario 1 has helped build confidence, as we've seen, because now we have 5 teachers at Belhaven who are exploring even the high flex model where they're going to do the synchronous teaching in person and remote learners at the same time.
Do we have enough teachers volunteering to fit the need based on the survey data you presented earlier?
No.
Got it. So we have more families who are saying, yes, we want to come back to school, and we don't have enough teacher volunteers to meet that need. Got
Correct.
it.
Through the chair.
Yes.
She can learn. If we continue with scenario 1 and more teachers, let's say we come back from spring break and all of those grades at Los Robles, Ronald McNair, Belhaven, and CCRMS all open up the way that if the proposals are presented on Thursday are accepted, and 2 weeks after that or a week after that, other teachers start to say, this looks like it's working, then they can also bring their classes back in one of these kind of models that's being given. And we could end up having pretty much all the schools open, even if we're doing it class by class. Yes?
We could have a reopen status for all the schools, but not a reopen status for the district.
Okay, thank you.
Cindy?
And then if I may add, every 2 weeks, we would still have to report why we are not open.
Yeah. That's a good point. We're still reporting to the state.
The way they're thinking about is, does every student in the district have the opportunity to return on campus if they want to? And so if the answer to that is no, then we're not fully open district-wide, even if every school was at least partially open. So some kids on campus have the opportunity.
Through the chair, another question.
Say Alexander.
Are there penalties? Are there repercussions?
I think I think that's a conversation we should have in regards to the impact of the instruction that our students are not receiving. But there's no other
Okay. Yeah.
penalty.
Other than the obvious student needs and yes. Okay. Thank you.
For clarity, the state just wants to know, but they're not doing anything with whatever answer you give them. Either way.
That's my understanding. Cindy, do you have more?
While there isn't a penalty in that sense, it will definitely be a searchable database in the sense that it's be public knowledge why we are not open.
Yeah, they have the data that we report every 2 weeks goes to the state dashboard, and they have a specific site where you can check reopen status. And so they have been reporting which districts are reopened or not, and now they're asking for increasing detail starting this week, including the why have you not yet reopened. So that will be very prevalent for everyone. Easy access for anyone to see.
Yeah. I will say this. As a superintendent who is very grateful for the anti-racist lens that this county superintendent and the superintendents wore when trying to identify how and create how to have a priority list for vaccines, it doesn't sit well with me that we are now still questioning when to open up, when conditions and what have you don't justify us anymore to not promote us doing in-person instruction. The whole point of that piece is to be able to come back and be safe, and the vaccine afforded us to be able to do that. And the positivity rate, the cases per 100,000 continue to decrease. The fact that the county may be in yellow in 2 weeks also, it just doesn't sit well with me. And it's hard to swallow with the fact that we had this privilege or this opportunity. And we need to do our part to continue with the anti-racist work.
Are there more scenarios that we're going to be able to go over?
Yes. Yes. Like I said, in the beginning, the data did not afford us, it was not safe to come back. I think everyone was in agreement of that. Our conditions have changed. And I think we have to keep up with the science. Scenario 2. Oh, go ahead.
Through the chair, just one little last thing. I do want to say that the one thing Ravenswood has that most district doesn't have is twice weekly COVID testing. In other districts, teachers only are being tested once every 2 weeks. So that is something that Ravenswood has that's a huge bonus for us, for our students, and for our community. Just putting it out there.
I just also wanted to add, I received word too that at Belhaven, all 3 to 5, except for one teacher, are willing to come back in person to do the proctoring of the test as well. And I know that's conversations that the middle school is having, is potentially maybe coming back May to be able to do the proctoring of the test in person too. So that's not the ideal purpose, but it will be helpful indeed. And to just acclimate and get us back on campus. So scenario 2 is to rely on volunteer teachers and substitutes for district-wide reopening. With this piece here, well, just so you're aware, reopening status does require a certificated teacher to be with the student at some point in the day and provide direct instruction, right? So we could potentially have learning hubs staffed and then push in certificated teachers to do direct instruction. Learning Hub Plus would require hiring lots of substitute teachers to cover the classrooms for those teachers that do not respond to the call of action, and those substitute teachers could support with the distance learning in the classroom. And then we have students that come on campus. All students can come on campus, but some still won't have access to the direct instruction from their own homeroom teacher. So yes. Any questions about this scenario?
Through the chair, I'm eager to see the rest of the scenarios, have them presented. But I would like to, maybe when we come back, understand the cost for this, because I imagine substitutes cost a lot more money than regular teachers' salaries.
They actually are less, just because they're not on the salary schedule, but they are less. But you're still looking at $150 to $200 a day.
So their per day rate is less than a teacher's rate.
But sorry, to clarify too, but we'd be paying the teachers and the substitutes. So
Got it.
it'd be 100 to 200K every day, plus on top of the teacher salaries.
Thank you for that, Trustee Bloom.
So here, teachers are would be required to return, but no change to homeroom. So this is a hybrid flex model. It's not currently in the MOU, right, with RTA, but it has been proposed and implemented by several teachers at Castaño. So we want to keep that option open for teachers. But here, you would do a scenario 1 plus half-day learning model. Okay, let you guys look at this. So you would do distance synchronous in the morning and in-person learning in the afternoon, or vice versa, or give teachers the choice of doing the flex model. And we want to emphasize the choice, because this is not bargain. It's also, it takes a lot of skill and will in terms of teaching kids online and teaching kids in person, right? And then with this piece, we would obviously, provide reasonable accommodations for teachers who have a medical note, or who have a medical note. And obviously, if a teacher who is in person is not able to come in that day, we will be able to provide a sub like we would do like regular school, where we would use a swing sub to be able to cover for the day the teacher might be out for whatever reason. But this is not the same as the Learning Hub Plus model. This is where we require the teachers to come back, all the teachers, and you do it so that there's no change in homeroom. And to do that, you either do in-person instruction in the morning, distance learning in the afternoon, swap, or teachers are really who want to, like they are doing at Castaño and some other sites at Belhaven, for example, do a high flex model where they're doing them at the same time. But that's by choice.
And this would dissolve learning hubs.
The learning hubs definitely would have another location. So we might need to use tents. For example, Los Robos Ronald McNair's proposal that we saw this evening, the School Working Group, is to have tents and have them be outside. And so their learning hubs are going to continue in the classroom. But this way we would actually be able to serve more kids. Those families who are still in learning hubs would still be able to have that supervision and support. Cindy?
Yeah, I just want to add that all of our Learning Hub partners are aware that, we're having these types of conversations with the board, and that they are willing to be as flexible as possible to support our students.
Thank you.
Okay. So scenario 4 is teachers are required to return but with the option of changing the homerooms. So again, if we don't change homerooms, then we are talking about scenario 3, where teachers are managing remote learners, their own remote learners, and in person, their roomies in their own class. Here, scenario 4 is they would change, students would have, if the schools change homerooms, then we could offer students a choice of a distance only or in-person only class, which means a fourth grade team might have a teacher who does want to do in-person and a teacher who does remote learning. And then that fourth grade cohort would switch up so that all the kids who want to do in-person instruction, even though they might have been with the teacher who's just going to do remote learning, will actually come and switch homerooms to do in-person instruction. And then the teacher who does the remote learning will receive the students who will no longer receive instruction from their teacher because that teacher's doing in-person instruction. So now they will receive remote learning from a new teacher. But they would tag team that cohort of fourth grade students. One teacher will do the in-person, the other teacher does the remote learning. We can look at how many days of the week we would do the in-person learning as well. And you see the options there. And of course, we would provide the reasonable accommodations in addition to those teachers who are in person providing the substitute if needed, so that we can be consistent with providing in-person instruction. Also, just to be informed, we received word from our Tony Stone, our director of HR, that the swing substitute agency that we use have been training their staff. So they have staff identified for remote learning, specifically instruction. They're doing they're informed about the different models that they would need to step into as a substitute.
Okay, through the chair. So in scenario 2.
Yes.
So where the rely on volunteer teachers and substitutes. There you go. I don't know if it was made clear to everybody who's listening in, just so that everybody realizes that if a substitute is hired, and let me clarify, make sure that I have my understanding correct on this. For the teachers who choose to stay remotely, but some half their students want to return to school. So the half that returns to school would have the substitute in the room with them to be the teacher who's just in there supervising the kids. But the actual homeroom teacher would still be doing the instruction for those kids. It's just allowing that teacher to stay at home. So the teacher would still be Zoom teaching the at-home kids and the kids in the hub, call it a hub, in the classroom. And maybe the teacher is on the screen or something. And that way the kids are all still learning from the homeroom teacher. The additional teacher in the classroom is just because you need to have a certificated person in a classroom full of kids. And then that person is there to provide extra help if needed. And when the Zoom teacher could be providing extra help to the Zoom kids. Am I understanding that correctly?
Just to clarify, the last point is we could do more learning hubs and have them do distance learning, but it wouldn't be considered reopening because their certificated person is remote. Right. And so that's why we were looking at the certificated sub, is that would then be reopening,
Even if they're still being taught by their original homeroom teacher, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So it would still be considered reopening. The students would still be taught by their homeroom teacher, allowing that teacher to remain away. Okay, thank you.
Wait, through the chair, wouldn't reopening require, the point of schools is for instruction, correct?
I'm sorry, Trustee Polito, you were in and out.
The reopening of schools is for the purpose of returning to in-person instruction.
That is correct.
So if a teacher is continues to teach from at home or wherever they are remotely, that would not be in-person instruction. That would be distance learning.
If the certificated teacher or if the certificated substitute doesn't do the direct instruction themselves and is only there to supervise a teacher to do remote learning.
I actually have a question about scenario 4. So would scenario 4, there you go. Would this allow for any student who wants to return to in-person instruction be able to? Or is it because you're kind of matching people, matching in-person students with teachers that are on campus and some that are going to be off? How does that work? For example, right now, there's a greater demand for in-person instruction than there is available teachers. So how would it work to manage staff with either a 100% distance learning with 100% in-person learning? Can you just tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it does rely and depend on numbers. It is a numbers game. So I just want to emphasize that these are scenarios we can play with based on numbers. So right now we have all the volunteer teachers coming back. So all the other classes where parents want their students to come back, what scenario could we pull? And we could actually, there are some here that we're currently using, like scenario 1 and scenario 3. And even scenario 4, Los Robles is exploring. Like, for example, if 4th grade has 3 classes with 84 students, if 70% want to return, that's about 59 who want to come back. That means you have 2 classes of 29 or 30 and 1 class of 25. So you would have 2 teachers who would do in-person instruction and 1 teacher who would then do the remote learning. And I think that some other districts have that experience where the principal or the district gives the principal or the teachers the opportunity to decide if who is willing to come back or not. And if there is no decision made, then the principal makes the decision or it's directed. Those teachers are directed based on skill set, abilities, what have you with technology, who would do better in-person instruction because technology and for many factors.
Okay, so, but for sure, the number of students that are requesting for in-person would be met by requiring teachers to return on campus. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
So those are the 4 scenarios. And Jen, if you wouldn't mind, our special director for this next piece.
Yes, thank you. We propose the idea of just like Superintendent Sudario was talking about, giving schools flexibility to determine models based on the number of students in their school site or at their grade level, to be able to come back and accommodate all of those needs, having that flexibility. We also want schools to consider the same set of priorities that you saw in an earlier slide: relationships, prioritizing number of days of in-person instruction, really having that same core of prioritization. And then once the site would determine what they wanted to do, they would work closely in concert with the superintendent to confirm their specific plan by each grade level based on that school's unique set of circumstances. Because you could have a situation in one grade level where every student wants to come back, and in another grade level, you only have a quarter who want to come back. So every scenario may be slightly different depending on what the students and their families would like.
Thank you.
Through the chair, what do you see as the advantages of giving schools the flexibility to make the decision? Like what makes that better than if you're considering the same factors, right, at this level? I'll call it administration level. Like what's the difference, right? When you considering the same thing they're considering, just like you're asking them to consider the same thing you're considering. So I'm trying to figure out what's the advantage.
I can give you a for example that I've thought about that wouldn't necessarily come into play right now because it involves the 6 feet. For example, if you had one grade level at a site be able to have all of their students come back and be in person with 6 feet apart based on the number of students returning in person, you could have them 5 days a week, 6 feet apart. But in another grade level, you still have to keep them 6 feet apart, but more students want to come back. And then they can only be present 2 days a week in order to accommodate for space. So you're grappling with those two priorities of space in a classroom and number of days of instruction. And the grade level presents you a different set of circumstances based on the interest of those students. So you need a little bit more flexibility to meet the student's need. If the 3 feet changes, or if 6 feet changes to 3 feet, that's really a game changer in terms of space for students in a classroom. But that's one thing I can think of, really allowing that flexibility at 2 different grade levels, something that you can't control, space. I mean, you can also buy a tent, but there's.
So again, you could make that decision. I'm just wondering why you're saying give the schools versus saying you're going to look at each individual school versus the district as a whole, right? Why is it that the school makes the decision? The school, even with the example you just said, could be like, oh, even though we can accommodate it 4 to 5 days a week, we're just going to go 2 days. So that's why I'm wondering why, because you're considering the same thing. So why give the decision?
I think right now we've been on this train and the train is going. And we started pushing the train down the track and adding more cars to the train because people are comfortable jumping on because there was flexibility about how the classrooms were going to be developed, because they had choice in the beginning, because it was not a requirement to return. Our MOU with our teachers is that until we are going to reopen district-wide, we do not require teachers to come back. And so until we offer and reopen school district-wide for those families that want to come back, we have been working with teachers who are willing to come back with schedules that they are creating with their principals. And we're trying to build confidence amongst our teachers. But Tam, you raise a great point. It is hard to argue the differences in programming. It is. But we started the flexibility, we created the flexibility, and now do we pull all of that back?
But wouldn't we be able to maintain some level of flexibility if we say at the district and leadership level, for example, obviously we're deliberating, we are moving forward with approving for teachers to be required to come back to campus and to offer in-person instruction. The flexibility can be in, do you apply scenario 3 or 4 depending on your individual school and the makeup of it. I see an opportunity to be able to do both, provide direction that is district-wide, which means we ask our teachers to return to in-person instruction, and we allow every single family to have the option of returning to in-person or staying distance learning. So we set that base standard as this is what we're offering as district-wide, and we do potentially allow each school site to have flexibility about what is the best model that works for them. And the 2 models that would reflect that type of board direction would be scenario 3 and 4, right? Do you do a hybrid high flex model, or do you do 100% distance and 100% in person? I see an opportunity to be able to do both.
Through the chair.
Trustee Alexander.
Going with any of these scenarios, scenario 3 or 4, just thinking about those 2. If we go with either scenario 3 or scenario 4, would repercussions of that then affect the schools that have already reopened in whatever model they have. So for instance, let's say we have to go with model or scenario 4. That would entail the classrooms that have already reopened to then reshuffle all their students.
I don't think so. I think we can work with the current models that are in play right now so that students can maintain with their homeroom teachers who are doing scenario 3, which is what you're speaking to. Scenario 3 is continue with scenario 1, where we've had classrooms already reopen and do in-person instruction. And then, you know, we look to have them think about, do you keep your homeroom? Scenario 3 is you keep your homeroom. You do in-person part of the day and remote learning the other part of the day. But to Trustee Anna Maria Palillo's point, we can give them the option to be able to do scenario 3 or scenario 4, which our sites are currently doing. Like Los Robles, is 5th grade is working between 2 teachers, and 1st grade is working between 2 teachers. And as long as we respond to the needs of our students for in-person instruction, we are meeting the criteria for reopening across the district. It's how creative and flexible do we want to be and maintain the current practices that our teachers who have already been on campus for a while. Do we continue with those and then allow flexibility about how to be creative and open up other classrooms?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. With everything in mind, let's just continue to finish the presentation, and then I'll ask that everyone hold their questions until the end. Thank you.
Great, we are almost there. So the district does have a lot of stimulus funding made available. And so I would like our chief business official, Will Eager, to please speak to these line items here, and just to make note of something very specific as well.
Gina, we missed one slide.
Oh, did we?
Yeah.
Is this the one? Oh, we did. Sorry, because there was a question. Yes. Thank you,
That's
Jen.
okay. So depending on the board direction, what we would plan is a phase in between April 12th and May 5th to roll the students and teachers back to school. At that point, everyone would get at least 6 weeks of on-campus instruction, and it will allow us to do all the end-of-year assessments to happen on campus. What we would start doing is communicating with families and staff to make sure that everybody understands the safety precautions that we're putting in place so they feel safe and comfortable coming back to school, parents and teachers. We want to coordinate with the learning hubs to make it a smooth transition. They have been incredibly supportive, all of the different learning hubs. And so we want to make sure that we have a smooth transition. We want to look at transportation and confirm who we can transport. It would be limited because of the constraints, but we want to be able to transport as many students as we can. We also need to plan for new technology needs or general technology needs, looking into owls and speakers and that kind of thing to make sure that our students who are at home are getting the best instruction possible if their parents choose to have them continue instruction at home. And then just put in place all the other signage and stickers and tents and tables. It's a heavy lift to get everything ready, and we are looking forward to doing that lift and hopefully fully entering and exiting stage 4 and getting all of our kids back on campus so that this can be a distant memory very soon.
Yeah, I do want to plant that seed before we go into the stimulus funds, is that we would love the direction from the trustees in terms of which scenarios, but in the fall, we are going to be able to bring our students back in person. And obviously families may still want to elect complete remote learning, but we would love to be able to have all of our families on campus who wish to do so 5 days a week without a hybrid model, without a scenario 1, 2, 3, or 4. Just more creative instructional strategies being used. Some culturally responsive education. All right, So I'll move us to the last point here, which is the stimulus funding update.
Good evening, trustees, and sorry for any background crying you may hear. Just over the last year or so, we've received a significant amount of stimulus funding, over about $20 million so far in planned stimulus funding and received stimulus funding. That sounds like a lot of money when you think about sort of the overall context of the district budget. And to be clear, it is a lot of money when you think about the overall context of the district budget. Sort of almost a half a year of revenue for us in a typical year has been received in one-time stimulus funding. A couple of things just to call attention to it. One, there's a variety of different sources, many of which is federal, some of which is state, specifically the AB 86 money. The second thing to notice here is the spending deadlines are reasonably soon. And even though I think we will sort of work to meet those spending deadlines, we are still thinking about the need here and our response here as a 5-year plan. So we're trying to think responsibly about how we spend this, not just in the short term, but also make some of this 20 million stretch out for several years in order to best support the needs of our students. I think right now there's a whole lot we don't know. As you sort of get further up this table, the more we do know, but as you get further down, there's a bit less that's just publicly available. Some of these funds are very recently passed. Most notably the March Rescue Plan, where we believe our total amount of funding could be $7.5 million or so. We're working on spending it within the constraints and as well as just identifying the overall constraints. So I probably won't be able to answer too many granular questions, but we did want to make you aware of the significant amount of funds. One thing I wanted just to call particular attention to, since I know it's been in the news and has been a bit controversial at times, is the in-person instruction grants. So this is sort of the state's incentive program to bring families and students back as quickly as possible. Funds decreased by about 1% a day for every day that we're not open, starting in mid-April. Well, obviously, if we're able to sort of move quickly to receive this, it would be nice to get the $700,000 or so the district's entitled to. But just to put it in context of the broader stimulus here, that's about 3% of the overall stimulus funding that we've been awarded. So while we certainly don't want to leave money on the table ever, we also, as I think we said earlier in the presentation, would never want to jeopardize any student's health or come back before we were fully ready in sort of pursuit of a relatively small amount of money in the scheme of the world here. Any questions on the variety of stimulus packages or anything I can answer in addition here?
Thank you all. Okay, so this is an opportunity where, we would like the board to help us give direction on which reopening scenario would you like us to pursue, and would you like staff to present something to, for vote on for this coming Thursday?
So I'll open the floor for discussion, and I'll also open it up for the public as well. If you wish to share, you can use the hand raise function, and we will upgrade you. We will move you over so that you'll be able to speak.
Through the chair.
Trustee Alexander.
With reopening campus, I know transportation was touched on. Are we going to be, for those kids who want to come to campus, are we going to be trying to get transportation? I know it's really tricky with buses and the number of kids and social distancing on the buses, and then also bubble concerns. But yeah, I want to know more about that and how the kids are going to get to school safely and how that's going to keep everybody safe. So that's just my question right now.
Well, Well, did you want to address around the transportation? But right now, we touched upon it ever so briefly, but we are just trying to first base determine the need. So then that way we can determine how many routes we actually need, how many buses do we actually need. Right now, we've been prioritizing those who are currently in in-person instruction right now, and it's a small number of students. What we have done is that principals, when they're calling about parents' interest in bringing students, we're not emphasizing the transportation, and we're still having a high number of families who want to bring students on campus.
Thank you.
So I see that we have a hand in the group. Francis, can we not upgrade him, but
I'll take an upgrade. I'm cool with that. Hi, this is Frances Robertson. My child is a student at Castano. I have a few questions around the mandatory testing for students. So I saw earlier that students would be tested 1 to 2 times a week. I'm just wondering why we're mandating our students to do that when other districts are not. And I'm also wondering how that's going to be performed. So if you can give me an idea of what that looks like.
Yes, Francis, thank you.
Testing, is that throat testing?
Thank you for that. Thank you
you.
for that question. We want to clarify for you. Only families who sign a waiver permitting their children to be tested will be tested. It is not mandated to test students. And the testing that we do have is through the oral swab it's the antigen testing, that's the nasal swab that we would do. And it's the rapid testing, but only if families submit a waiver permitting us to do so. It is not mandated.
Thank you.
Sorry for the confusion. We were just excited about having the opportunity to do screening and provide rapid testing that could identify anyone with a COVID positive result. And instead of waiting 24 hours or however many hours or waiting until families inform us, we could actually do the quarantine immediately.
Do I get to speak?
Oh, you're muted, Trustee Latu.
apologies. Yes, we will move on to Ms. White. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't know I just got promoted. Hi, my name is Rhonda White Bluford, and I am speaking as a parent tonight. I just have a couple questions. I've saw a lot of things around TK through 5th grade. I'm wondering, have we looked at what that's going to mean for the middle school? Depending on the different classes or the different programs that your child is in, might look differently for the number of teachers that you have. So I want to make sure, as we're considering coming back out of distance learning, that we have thought about that fully, and that we don't have teachers come back to then go back home and have the schedule disrupted. So I just want to make sure that middle school, especially the 8th graders, are not disrupted as much as possible, due to the fact that once we come back from spring break, there's only about 6 to 8 weeks left of school. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers? I see a hand.
Just through the chair, and just in response to that, and we want to be mindful. We've always tried, we want to have as minimal disruption as possible. That's our aim, and that's our goal. And so it is a numbers game, and we need to see what our actual numbers will be for our middle school. That will determine how we move forward. But I do want to reiterate that we will be mindful of the impact on schedules.
Thank you. Hi, panelists. You may unmute yourself.
Hi there, my name is Giovanni Brown Austin. First and foremost, I just want to thank you guys all for your diligent work on that. I have had to open one school and I understand the complexities of what all comes with that. As well as I want to lift up the Boys and Girls Club, as mentioned, who have stepped into the gap in a major way, and being able to provide the hubs. And with that being said, what I haven't heard about is kind of what that's going to look like in supporting these folks and their turnaround and in the possibilities of after school care for families. Because I know that, as we're looking at the different scenarios and the survey that was brought out, it was 2 days, 3 days, half days, and it was emphasized no after school care. But I think that is something as a parent, which really was a determining factor for me and even answering the survey in an honest way. And so I just wanted to see how we can bring forward an understanding of how we're going to support that turnaround for those folks. And what is that in a part of the vision? Where is that in the vision of the school reopening? Thank you.
Was it, I need clarification. Was it around the after school program? If there was going to be an after school care?
Yes, it was the after school care, and how is that going to be supported in that turnaround so we can actually create the success of attendance, for a lot of families who definitely took advantage of after school care and needed it. It wasn't an advantage, it was a need.
Yeah. Thank you, Giovanni, for your question. And right now for this, while we are currently, the current state that we're in now, not necessarily being a reopened status or not, the Boys and Girls Club, any learning hub is operating under a small group cohort guidance. And Cindy, please chime in too after. And so they are limited to the number of students that they can serve as being under the small group cohort guidance. So they can have 14 students with 2 adults at this time. Did you want to share some more information, Cindy, around the after school?
Yeah, I think again, our partnership, especially with the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula, since they are a group that we normally work with for the after school program. I think it's one of those, we need to look at our numbers and see how impacted, depending on what direction the board would like us to move, and how that would impact the learning hubs, right? Because then we can we could potentially transition learning hub staff into different supports, whether that means during the day or the possibility of after school program. But that's all kind of dependent on some of the direction the board would like us to take. And then also the conversations with our partners.
Yeah, I would have to say that in the fall, the summer and fall, we are so looking forward to the opportunities of some of our programs resembling the supports that we used to have in supporting families before after school. But we know how much of a value add that is, Giovanni. So we are trying to be as creative as possible with our current learning hubs too, as we start bringing students back on campus. How can we do a dual programming at the same time?
Mr. Highland, you may unmute yourself at this time.
Good evening, district, board members, and Superintendent Gina. My question is for my grandson, who is a CCRMS student. He's going to be going to MA next year. And so I'm really concerned about the transition from this distance learning. And so my recommendation on the survey was at least 2 days in class and then 3 days in the distance learning. And I thought that that would be a schedule that the school can rotate to get all the students in. If they get their 2 days, some are Monday, Wednesday, some are Tuesday, Thursday, that type of situation. And so getting to board trustee member, I think it was Sabomahim, who was saying something like, why would you leave it up to the schools? I would be concerned if you wouldn't make a recommendation, at least to the school, to a strategy that might work for them. And then work it that way. And I am concerned about the health of the teachers, but I do think if we keep like a hub size of no more than 15 students with teachers, that you may be able to work it out, 14 or 15 students in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Highland. If there's no other public comment, I will move to the board.
Through the chair, I think that, you know, I think scenario 3 and 4 make the most sense. And I think exactly what Trustee Polito was saying is that we should reopen as a district and we should give some flexibility to the schools to decide what's going to work best for them. Just because you know, if we go back to even just the attendance slide, that shows such a stark difference of when kids get to come to the hub, when they have an actual physical place that they're going to, they're more likely to show up. And I know there's probably, I mean, all of the social emotional stuff too, right? How kids feel. And I think that that was something that we talked about in our school improvement working group. Like there is a social emotional bent here that when kids get to come back on campus, there's a difference in learning. There's a difference in how they feel. There's a difference in how they engage, even with the students that may still be in distance learning, but if they're in person. And I know a lot of things that we see is anecdotal, right? Or, you know, clearly there's no long-term studies on this at all yet because we're in it right now. But, you know, being married to a teacher who's gone back and at the lowest bar, which is Zoom in the room, right? And our school district is not doing that. Our school district is doing way more than that in every classroom that's been open. And I know that all of our teachers are not going to do what the lowest bar is. I know that they are invested in our students' learning, they're invested in our student engagement, and they're invested in our students growing and being safe. But I can tell you, you know, like just being able to go and attend, my husband's saying 2 students who he barely saw online are now in the classroom producing great work, right? And this is at the middle school level. And yes, there was some changes in homerooms and stuff like that. But at the same time, like if we can do that for our kids, you know, and our students in our district, let's do it, you know, and I that's why I agree with, you know, scenario 3 and 4, and also giving room for each classroom, or not each classroom, but each school to figure out what works best for their families. Because as I mentioned, my daughter is at Los Robles, you know, Ronald McNair, and my decision was different in July, right? When the rates were really high, I didn't want to send her back. Then I got and did 1 month of distance learning at home with a kindergartner. And I was like, when can I sign up for the Learning Hub? Because I had to work. We had to do, you know, my husband and I both had to work. So it was a lot to manage. And just that difference that she had in the classroom with her peers, so different in her, even her desire to learn and want to learn. And now having her teacher be able to push in, because we're at the grade level at Los Robles that's open, technically reopened, because she's getting in-person learning and teaching from her teacher. Maybe it's not every day, but it's 2 hours live or on the big screen, getting that in-person time. It's just been so amazing to see the growth and desire to continue to learn and go to school and want to see her teacher. I even asked her the other day, I was like, would you be sad if you didn't have your same teacher, but you had a teacher that saw you every day? And she was like, I'd be a little sad, but I'd be okay, right? Like I want to see a teacher every day. I want to see that teacher in person, or whichever teacher it is. And I think that we sometimes will forget, right? Like, do we ask our kids these questions? And a lot of times they're going to say yes, or they'll say no because they're lazy. They don't want to wake up and brush their teeth and get dressed and go to school. But when they're in that room, it's so much better for them to be in person with their peers and with their teachers. And so I definitely think that we should reopen because I think it's what's best for the kids. And I also think that we've put in all the safety protocols, ventilation, vaccinations, testing, all of those things are there, and our model is accepted, right, by the county. Our safety plan is accepted by the county. And I think that that's something that we have worked really hard on doing in these last few months. And we're at a place where we can open and we can reopen safely. And I think that if there are teachers who can't come back because it's not safe for them, we're not saying that you have to come back still. It's let's have a conversation. Let's have a discussion. Let's see what is best and what is safe for you. And I think that that's where I'm at. And I think that that's something that's evolved in the last few months. But I also think that that is really important to get our kids the things that they need.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I believe that staff presented a great presentation to us. They showed us where we were to where we are today. They've showed us their planning, and they've showed us their recommendations, which is to resume to in-person instruction, either in a hybrid model or, scenario 3, scenario 4. I feel that our students and our families have been very flexible and understanding over the past year as to what's happened, this unexpected pandemic. And I feel that I don't think we're in a place to be saying we can continue not to servicing our students and our families in the way that they deserve. And I feel like everything presented tonight and even before tonight shows us that we are at the point of doing right by our students and saying we can bring them back, right? Whether it's 2 days, whether it's 5 days, our families deserve the opportunity to opt in for a return to campus for in-person instruction. And the data shows it, whether it's the cases dropping significantly, whether it's how we're tracking our students and seeing how successful they're being, how engaged they're being. Everything around this it's gearing us to reopen schools. And I actually think that Superintendent Sadaria and her leadership team have been very conservative in their approach, and they've been very cautious in their approach. And, if you ask me personally how I felt, I think everybody knows that I've been pushing for this some time ago. And I think even with that, I feel like leadership has been very conservative and cautious about staff needs. And they've been balancing out the different factors that are going to weigh into where we got to be. But I mean, we really are at that point. We say one of our core values is being student-centered. This should be a student-centered decision. And the best thing for students is to bring them back on campus for in-person instruction for all those who desire and choose to come back in person. So I am supportive of, our district and our board, hopefully tonight, giving direction to the superintendent to require for us to return as a district-wide, and for us to give all students and families the opportunity to return to in-person, and also give the sites the flexibility that they need to select between scenario 3 and 4. And that is my viewpoint. And I hope that the rest of the board feels the same or a very similar way.
Thank you.
Through the chair.
Trustee Alexander.
So I agree, and I also have some concerns still. Yes, student engagement is much better. Yes, it's proven to be safe. There's still things in the back of my mind, like looking at the middle school schedule and making sure that it's doing best by the kids. the way that we looking at reopening, because there are plans out there that are not doing best by the kids. Not saying that we have that plan. And I understand that teachers, yes, we're all vaccinated, and I believe that teachers who are capable of coming back definitely should be coming back at some point. I want to make sure, though, that when we look at teachers' situations and say, I know it said with a medical note. Sometimes the situation might go beyond just a medical note. So I want to make sure that we're looking at teachers and saying, all right, what kind of reasonable accommodations can be made to support all the teachers as well as all the students and all the families. And I also want that the transportation issue is still there in my mind to make sure kids are coming to and from school safely. And the other thing is making sure that nothing happens at all while we're still in the purple or, even the upper end of the red tier. After spring break, I would want to see that positivity rates don't go back up, that community spread doesn't become another problem coming in to our schools. So those are where my concerns are. Yeah, I think that's it.
I'll jump in. I'm a bit on the fence. A lot of my safety concerns have been answered through the presentation, so I want to say thank you to the staff. Extremely thorough, gave examples, and a lot of those, it answered a lot of the initial questions I had. Personally, my mind comes down to the number of vaccinations that have happened in our city, especially, I don't have the demographics for Belhaven, but I know for East Palo Alto, we have roughly a population of 30,000 residents, and there's only been roughly a 2,700 plus amount of vaccines that were allocated to residents in East Palo Alto. That's not counting the individuals that went outside of county, so I will add an additional 1,000 for all of those. But a lot of, and I'm giving this context to why I'm a bit on the fence. Another one of my concerns is the teachers and the staff. I do believe that we do center a lot of our decisions around our students and our families. But for me to go forward, especially with option 3 and 4, I would really like there to be a lot of talks between the district and staff and RTA regarding a lot of those things. But those are my main issues, but a lot of my other issues were resolved during the presentation. So I am on the fence, but I will be in support of the general consensus if come down to needing to reopen our schools.
Go ahead.
Yes, Superintendent?
No, I was just gonna add, President Latu. I think scenario 4 would entail a lot of communication around between teachers in a grade level, for example, about who would be willing to come onto campus or not. But we would, if we got direction from the board to pursue scenario 3 and scenario 4, we would need direction to have permission to be like, we need to require staff to come on campus if neither or if no teacher in that grade level, for example, was going to report for in-person instruction. So there is going to, I want to reassure you, there's going to be a lot of dialogue as we've done currently to get this, to get the different types of models of instruction, whether it's a high flex, hybrid, half day, in person or not, to keep homeroom, or scenario 4 where there needs to be switching of homerooms, because there's going to be collaboration within the grade level to determine which teacher would come on campus or not. There will be a point though, if there's no teacher that's willing to come on campus, that there needs to be direction that we need to provide as a district to staff.
Noted. Thank you.
So through the chair, I'm really interested to know more about the reasons, if it does become a problem, right? If you're seeing that teachers, because I don't really understand the teacher's perspective about if they want to come or don't. I know you have, so many volunteers now, but I don't understand the reasons, if there are reasons that teachers don't want to come back. If there are teachers who have vaccines, have been vaccinated and they don't want to come back. So I'd like to understand those reasons more. If that is the case, maybe it's not. But if we're going to go with pushing this forward, reopening across the district, it feels like, and this goes to my concern about giving schools choice, it feels like option number 4 seems to be the most flexible and the most considerate of parent circumstances, right? In terms of like, can I take my, my child to school half day every day and come back? Like that feels like that could be more limiting to a family. And then in terms of what you just talked about, Superintendent Sudaria, about conversations with teachers, it feels like there's more flexibility with scenario 4, for having teachers, some at, doing distance learning, some in the classroom, or I don't know, I could be wrong, but that's what it feels like. And yeah. So for me, I would be pushing scenario 4, not necessarily 3. But if obviously if the board wants
I
to
see.
3 and 4.
And it does address one of, through the chair, I'm sorry.
No worries.
In response to Trustee Subomni here, it does respond to Stuart Highland's request to maybe have 2 days off, 3 days on, and that's what scenario 4 would be able to provide. So just to be clear, scenario 4 is where we would change homerooms, right? There's an option to change homerooms where a teacher or 2 teachers will handle all the in-person instruction and 1 teacher handle in-person learning. Or it might be that we only need 1 teacher for in-person instruction and the other 2 teachers do the remote learning.
Yeah, I think we can't we can't check the box for every concern, I don't think. I think, we've got to be as comprehensive as possible in meeting the needs of the community we serve and thinking about safety for everyone. But I don't think it's possible to meet every single preference, is what I'll say. I think we can meet every safety concern. I don't think we can meet every style preference. And so in terms of homeroom, while I do understand the impact of having a relationship with a teacher, if you have to give up something, which it feels like you have to give up something in each one of these scenarios, I think scenario 4 is going to be the most, I think, in my opinion, it's the best scenario for our families and staff and district.
Through the chair, can I ask a clarifying question due to Trustee Shibomi's point? Scenario 3, aren't parents still able to choose 100% distance learning under scenario 3 if they choose not to want to bring their kids only for half days?
Yes.
So parents would still have the flexibility to decide, I'm keeping my kid all day at home because this half day doesn't really work for me, or because I just don't feel like right now I want to return my student for whatever reason. So scenario 3, the reason why Trustee Jibril I was comfortable with either one was because it gave parents that option to remain distance learning regardless. They don't have to return to in-person. And it also gives the school sites of flexibility. Like I believe Castaño is doing scenario 3. And I think so far what I've learned is that it's working really well. And so to disrupt the model that is currently working well for them, I would like to be accommodating to what they've just launched, because we just approved it at the last meeting also, just so they don't have to hit that restart button all over again. But I definitely consider all the elements that you've said, but at least the way I understood it, and I could be wrong, it feels that parents still can opt in, opt out, and they're able to make choices that best reflect their family needs and student needs in both scenarios, correct? And I don't know if that's helpful to your thought process, but I just wanted to add that piece.
No, thank you for that, Trustee Polito. And I do know that people can still opt out. I was just thinking about the people who are saying, yes, I want to be in person. And my in-person options are, I can have full day, 2 to 3 to 5 days a week, or I can only have half day. And so I was only looking at that scenario. And if a school chose that you can only have half day, it felt like that would be unfortunate for the families that want and need their children to be in school. But I do understand that the option to stay home is still there for families.
And actually, I think you make an excellent point. Like, if I really think about the scenarios, scenario 4 does seem ideal, right? Because to your point, if we're saying, we want to bring kids back on campus for in-person instruction, a whole day of instruction, is, I think, clearly the better option. And the only reason I'm supportive of 3 or 4, because I know it'd be easier to move the district forward and get on board with the idea. My personal opinion is your preference. The reason why I was like, okay, I can live with 3 or 4 is because I feel like more schools and like our staff level will feel like, okay, they're willing to work with, whatever special circumstances revolve around each school site. But to your point, if I don't consider that component, I would go also with option 4, because what you're saying makes perfect sense to me. Like, full day in-person instruction is ideal. It's what I would want 5 days out of the week, but I know it's not possible right now. So I'm just easing off of that.
I have a question. Say the scenarios are 3 and 4 going forward. Is there the possibility that we can give each specific school site the option to choose between one or the other? And I say this just in the context of all of our school sites are not similar. They're all quite different, and the principals know how to operate and run their school site to the best that they can. And so instead of minimizing the options, is there a possibility that we could give them either or, and we can monitor however we monitor? This is so hard for me because I'm just like, oh, I don't know. But in my mind, I'm just like, at least they would still have some kind of control.
The answer is yes, because for example, Los Robles is doing a scenario 4 where the grade levels, even across grade level, because you have a grade level, some grade levels only one teacher. So they already plan together across grade level. And so they're already prepared to take on students as well. They're already anticipating about the fall, right? Like, oh, if I actually am a 5th grade teacher and I support 4th grade students, I'm gonna prepare to have them in the fall as well. And then you have other school sites that are considering the high flex model, which is scenario 3. So what we would like, direction is great in terms of reopening status across the district, and we figure out how to fill the gaps for those grade levels and families who we have not been able to serve yet, and utilize scenario 3 and scenario 4, because that is what we are doing now. It'll allow for flexibility as well for the middle school too, as we consider how to open up the middle school depending on the numbers.
Superintendent, the difference is that all students who would like to return for in-person instruction will be able to do so, because currently we don't have that option.
We don't have that option because until we have direction about reopening school,
right,
we can't require teachers to come back.
Right. So what we're doing is we're really scaling up what we currently have already started. Yes. And I think that's a key component. Staff is already, running through scenario 3 and 4. The difference is everything is on a limited capacity. We're now looking to do this on a grander scale because we want all our families to have the option of returning on campus. So, I mean, for me, it's really important that we clarify that all families will have the option to return to in-person instruction, depending on the scenario that they choose, the school sites choose.
Correct.
Through the chair, also to clarify that when we say, like, we don't, like, I know you said we don't have to choose a scenario, but then it's also the fact that if we do a district-wide reopening, we can still utilize the learning hubs, right? So we are in conversation of how that would look, how they would be support to us. So if there was a half day or an AB day, like, what are options for our families who do want the 5-day in person, right? With the learning hub. Those are all options as well that each site can decide how to do it depending on what their scenario is. Is that correct?
Yeah, and yes, and I want to go back to also what Trustee Shibomiheen said around preference, right? And if I misspeak, Trustee Shibomiheen, tell me. But we've been doing a style preference based on teachers, and I think we need to start focusing on style preference based on our student needs. To Anna Maria's point, we've been very conservative and very cautious about how to proceed. And we are now in a place where we can serve our kids based on family's preference. And I'm prepared to stand that ground that we need to start serving our families based on family preference. Another reason is families are shopping right now too in regards to schools that are providing services that meet their needs, whether it's remote learning or in-person instruction. I've always prided myself on being able to have programs that we've been able to offer to families. And we're able to do that right now to a degree. But to Trustee Anna Maria's point is being able to scale up now. And with scenario 3 and scenario 4, we will be able to provide these options for our families, ideally every single day. And we will have to wait and sit back for that summer and fall to make that happen every single day. But we could do that for families right now who are interested in coming back to a degree.
Thank you. So I do note that Ms. White's hand is up. I will promote. Hi, Ms. White.
Hello.
Are you speaking as RTA president?
I'd like to make a comment, please.
5 minutes on the clock, please.
I won't need that much time, probably a good minute and I'm out of here.
Thank you.
All righty. Superintendent, board members, trustees, presidents, parents, families, friends, teachers, everyone. Just want to say thank you for being here today. Thank this board for having this great study session. I've just got a couple comments and things to say. And one is, as the board is deciding on whether or not to reopen the district in full reopening status, I'm hoping that the board will as you're considering this, that we keep as many options open to schools as possible. Because as Superintendent Sudaria stated, various schools are doing various things, whether it's the Learning Hub Plus, whether it's the simultaneous teaching, whether it's the 2 or 3 days. I think it is very important as we are coming back to school in whatever system we're coming back in these last 6 to 8 weeks, that teachers have as much flexibility in order to meet the needs of the students. Secondly, I was under the impression that if we come back in full district reopening status, that we would not be able to use the learning hubs in the current way in which they're being used. So I'm hoping that we can flush that out and get that correct, because we as well were thinking about some Learning Hub Plus and some flexibility. So I think the more information that we have around that will be useful. And then also, I want to make sure that as we are offering more and more in-person learning to families, that we continue to remember that there are families who are choosing to keep their kids in remote learning. And they were told that they could do that for the remainder for the entire year, as well as that they would be able to keep their homeroom teachers. So as we are talking about moving and sharing, let's also be mindful of what we are or are not offering our parents and our students and our families. And just for the record, teachers always have kids' best interests at heart, whether it seems or appears like that. It appears or seems like that. We always have our students' best interests at heart. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry. And we will continue to work with the district as we have been doing. I know, Anna, stop laughing at me. I'm not going to take my whole 5 minutes, but we will continue to work with the district, as in getting our vaccines, as in moving to the front of the line, as in more and more teachers are coming and being confident and comfortable with volunteering and coming back and making it possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just to highlight, Ms. White also sits as the RTA president, which is why she was able to speak twice, once as a parent and one as Madam President. So thank you. So let's continue. I think we have a basic gist, and I just want to really quickly get feedback, but I think the general notion of what I am seeing and getting is that we will continue forward with option 3 and 4. Does that sound correct to the board?
We're going to reopen as a district and offer in-person instruction to all families and use scenarios 3 and 4 for each school site to determine what best fits their needs.
Beautifully said. Yes. What Trustee Polito just said. Are we in consensus?
Through the chair,
Trustee Alexander?
do we have a timeline for when we would need to have everybody back?
Good question. Through the chair. There is no timeline. Bill, our CBO, mentioned when we were going over the stimulus funds that the in-person instruction that was like 3% of the budget, that money, however, whenever we open, we lose 1% each day. But that's the only thing to consider, but that's nothing really that we are putting all our, hanging our hats on at all. So April 12th was going to be the start date for 6 classrooms at Castaño, for, my goodness, I think Belhaven as well, and Los Robles, Ronald McNair with the 1, 2, 3, and 5, if I stand corrected. I might have screwed up those start dates.
Those were some of the proposals that we were going to bring forward on Thursday.
Okay, so we're bringing those on Thursday, but we would like to phase in those classrooms first, starting April 12th. And then as we explore our numbers and the scenarios and principals work with their staff and teams, then we would be able to roll out the next dates of when. And our goal is, as Jennifer Graba mentioned in one of the slides, was to have the phase-in models done by the week of May 3rd. So we start April 12th, then the week of the 19th, then the 26th, then May 3rd.
Thank you. We have a meeting on Thursday, another board meeting, and in that meeting, I hope to hear a lot more updates on the specifics around our 2 scenarios that we put forth. And so, with that being said, Thank you all for attending. Thank you all for participating. Thank you to the staff for all your hard work and creating these scenarios. And thank you to the teachers as well as the community for coming forth. I will also like to take this second just to acknowledge that our country has gone through a lot of things over the last week, from Atlanta to Colorado. And so as a district, I would like to say that our thoughts are with you. And I hope that you all stay safe. And at 8:25, I will convene the meeting. Thank you all and have a wonderful night. Stay safe.
Thank you, trustees. Thank you, team.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Solomon. Mr. Cardenas.